schizophrenia is one specific type of psychotic disorders among the entire gamut of various other psychotic disorders. So, schizophrenia is a very peculiar sort of a disorder in psychiatry. It is not a single entity, it is a symptom cluster, a homogeneous cluster of symptoms which we see having symptoms of varied variety, be it positive symptoms, negative symptoms, cognitive symptoms, functional symptoms, motor symptoms, and they do occur in every case of schizophrenia in varied proportions. Some cases of schizophrenia have more of positive symptoms, some have more of negative symptoms, while there are cases in which primarily the complaint is pertaining to cognitive decline. So, schizophrenia is a homogeneous cluster of various symptoms which we need to know of. So, as the case is with most of the psychiatric disorders, same theory goes for schizophrenia also. Here also, there is disturbance of thought, emotion, behavior, and these disturbances in these three domains is quite interrelated. A patient of schizophrenia can have disordered thinking in which he may have ideas which are not logically connectable to a normal individual. They may have some disorders of perception, some alteration of attention. Their emotional expressiveness may be altered. It may be, usually in most cases, it becomes reduced or becomes flat. But in some cases, there can be heightened emotional responsiveness also. Along with this, there are disturbances in movement and behavior. And the symptoms of schizophrenia are significant to that extent that it affects the individual's functioning in whatever sphere of life he is in, like in his family, when he is outdoor, at the place of work, at the place of studies, everywhere his life gets affected by one way or the other. And his capacity to work independently gets significantly diminished. That is one of the reasons that schizophrenia contributes a lot towards causing disability and functional incapacitation of the affected individual. There is a significantly increased risk of suicide and death in cases of schizophrenia. As we go on, as we proceed in this lecture, we will understand why and how the suicide rate is higher in schizophrenic individual vis-a-vis general population. The prevalence is to the tune of 1%. Out of every 100 individual, there is definitely presence of schizophrenia in at least one individual. So don't go by this figure. It is quite underreported. It is quite underdiagnosed. Therefore, this figure could be a bit higher. This is a conservative estimate that at least 1% is the lifetime prevalence of schizophrenia. Gender bias is there. Again, we can't go, there's no specific reason that why it affects men more than women, but still, this is what we have got from the studies that have been conducted. Maybe this gender discrepancy can vary, can change as research goes on. And this onset is usually typically in the late adolescent period or the early adulthood period. And men tend to be diagnosed at an earlier age. Now, if we go by the DSM-5 criteria, DSM-5 is the American system of classifying psychiatric disorders, and they have given a criteria for schizophrenia also. And as far as this criteria is concerned, there has to be presence of 2 or more of these symptoms for at least 1 month. And out of these, there should be presence of at least delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, disorganized or catatonic behavior, and negative symptoms. You will understand about these terms as we go on with this lecture, as we proceed. So, delusion, as you all know, and this again is part of the criteria only. The disturbance should be significantly affecting his functioning, his relationship, and level of self-care. And the signs of disorder should have been there for at least 6 months. And if during a prodromal or a residual phase, negative symptoms or two or more of the symptoms out of the above list, 1 to 4 in less severe form. So just to, if we don't, this was the criteria for diagnosing schizophrenia, but primarily we should be aware of the major symptom domains which are there in schizophrenia. Every schizophrenic will have some positive symptoms, some negative symptoms, some disorganized symptoms, some cognitive symptoms, some functional symptoms, and the respective percentage or the proportion of these symptoms in every case will vary. By positive symptoms and negative symptoms, what do we understand? By positive, we means something which was not there but it got added on. It was a plus because of the illness. Because of the illness, the person is having these symptoms. So these are positive symptoms. Delusions and hallucinations are the positive symptoms. And going by the same logic, it is the negative symptoms which were already there, but because of the illness, these things have diminished or they have reduced, like avolition. A person was quite willing to take initiative earlier on, but because of illness, now he has stopped taking any initiative whatsoever. So he has gone into avolition. That is one negative symptoms. And along with this, there are other negative symptoms like alogia, which means poverty of speech. He will speak less than usual. Anhedonia, inability to derive pleasure out of previously pleasurable activities. Blunted affect, asociality, and disorganized symptoms can also be there. It could be manifesting in his speech or in his behavior pattern. So positive, negative, disorganized, cognitive, functional, these are the various symptom domains. And why it is important to know? Because based on this we can predict the prognosis of a particular case, and based on this we can plan the appropriate therapy for the individual. So what are the positive symptoms? Now, in positive symptoms, we have primarily delusions and hallucinations. Delusions are false, firm, unshakable beliefs which are not in keeping with the individual's social and economic background. Delusions are not superstition. Like superstition is something which is culturally accepted. People believe in it. Not only the patient, but it's the culture, it is the society, his family members, his neighbors, everyone believes in that particular idea. So that is a superstition. But delusion is something which is not in keeping with the socio-cultural beliefs of the person. So it is firmly held, it is contrary to reality, and it is resistant to whatever evidence you present to the contrary. That is why it is firmly held. And what are the different types of delusion which a patient with schizophrenia can have? It could be persecuted delusion. Everyone is against me. They are plotting and planning against me. They want to destroy me. They want to kill me. They want to make me poor. They want to rob me. Things like that. These are the various contents of persecuted delusion which a patient can have. Along with this, there could be delusions of thought insertion, thought of getting broadcast from his mind, thought of being controlled by some outside external agency, grandiose delusions, ideas of reference. So these are the different types of delusion. The list doesn't end here. It is just a description of the commonly found delusions in schizophrenia. There could be other delusions even having bizarre content which a patient with schizophrenia can have. The other positive symptom is hallucination. What is hallucination? Hallucination means presence of perception without any stimulus being present. So a person is hearing voice when nobody is around. That is an example of auditory hallucination. And 74% of patients with schizophrenia tend to have one or the other auditory hallucinations. Again, under auditory, we have different types of auditory hallucination. It could be first person, second person, third person. The first person auditory hallucination is equivalent to thought echo. A person is hearing his own thoughts in his mind. That is first person auditory hallucination. And second person is hearing a voice which is commanding him to do one thing and commanding him not to do one other thing. So that is a command hallucination which a patient is having. That is an example of second person auditory hallucination. And the third type of hallucination which is having a greater diagnostic significance then the first and the second person one is the third person auditory hallucination. Here the person will complain of hearing a voice or voices which are discussing about the patient in third person, or a patient is being talked about in third person by a voice which is giving a running commentary on whatever the patient is doing. The patient is having his meal, he is holding a spoon, he is spilling the water from his glass over his clothes. He will hear a continuous third person auditory hallucination, third person running commentary on whatever he is doing, and this is quite a disturbing sort of a symptom for the patient, which disturbs him mentally, and he is not able to sleep. He is not able to feel comfortable at any point of time because this running commentary goes on and on and on, and he is feeling very much distressed because of this. Majority of the cases with schizophrenia tend to have auditory hallucinations, but there are cases in which, along with auditory, there are also associated hallucinations in the visual domain, and even there we have seen cases having olfactory or gustatory hallucinations along with auditory in cases with schizophrenia. Now, what are the negative symptoms? As I earlier described, this basically denotes that deficits which the patient is having in various functioning, like his initiative, like his speech part, like his ability to experience pleasure. If these domains gets affected, hence his ability gets reduced in these particular domains, we call it deficits or negative symptoms. So when negative symptoms are also known as deficit symptoms, and these are avolition, asociality, anhedonia, blunted affect, alogia. So these are the entire list of negative symptoms. Research has shown that patients having more of negative symptoms vis-a-vis the positive symptoms tend to have a poorer prognosis, and they tend to have more number of episodes and greater degree of functional decline and inter-episode deficits in functioning than cases having more of positive symptoms. So having more of positive symptoms, a patient is more likely to recover. He's likely to have a better prognosis, better response to therapy, and better functional recovery. And And what are the disorganized symptoms of schizophrenia? It could be manifesting in speech or is in behavior. In speech, speech is basically a reflection of the thought process a patient is having. And if somebody has got disturbed speech, it is indicative of some problem in his form of thought, which we call formal thought disorder. A patient will be having a problem of organizing ideas, like you will engage the patient in some conversation, but he will not be able to give a logical reply to that. He will be describing a lot many thoughts which are unrelated to what you have asked, and even the thoughts which he is describing will be and not be very much coherent with each other also. So it will be a quite a disorganized sort of a presentation of speech, which is indicative of formal thought disorder. There could be loosening of associations also. He will not be sticking on to one topic which you have asked. He will derail to some other topic and some other topic, and finally in the end it will be very difficult for you to bring him back to the point which you had already asked. This is one of the very important symptoms of schizophrenia, and because of this the functional decline is quite significant. Along with this, patient can also have disorganization of his behavior. He will dress in a very unusual, very peculiar, strange manner or a silly manner. Like in a hot weather, you can see patients walking in your clinic wearing heavy coats and hat and dressed as if it is quite cold outside. But so this is the peculiarity of dressing sense or the way they will behave with you that will be affected in schizophrenia. And the third most important symptom, which there are cases of schizophrenia in which predominantly the motor symptoms will be the presenting symptom. Like family members will bring a patient to you who is not talking, who is speechless, sitting in one posture, not changing his body position, not accepting water, not accepting food, not at all moving also. So that is a presentation of catatonic stupor. Catatonic stupor is one of the presentation of schizophrenia, and here there are number of symptoms like echolalia, echopraxia, staring, mutism, posturing, and these are again part of the same disorder, but it is primarily affecting the motor system. So these are the various motor symptoms like flexibility, catatonic immobility, mutism, staring, posturing, automatic obedience. These are the various types of catatonic symptoms or motor symptoms which schizophrenic patients can have. Along with schizophrenia, we also need to know about other psychotic disorders. There are a few psychotic disorders which are of some importance, like schizophreniform disorder. They resemble schizophrenia as far as the symptom profile is concerned, but their symptom duration is greater than 1 month but less than 6 months. And their symptoms must include delusions, hallucination, and disorganization of speech and behavior. And then we have brief psychotic disorder. Here the symptom duration is less than 1 month, minimum of 1 day and less than 1 month. It is often triggered by some extreme stressor. We definitely have one or the other precipitating factor which we can elicit from the history, and that is responsible for causing brief psychotic disorder. It is also known as acute and transient psychotic disorder in ICD-10 classification. And here the symptom cluster includes hallucination, delusions, and disorganized speech, again similar to schizophrenia. Then there is another category of disorder which is called schizoaffective disorders. As you already, if you can connect from a lecture on affective disorder, you know what all are parts of affective disorder, depression, and manic episodes. So here, symptoms of both schizophrenia and either a depressive or a manic episode are present in the patient at the same point of time. And this symptom of a major mood episode are present for majority of the duration of illness. So these are the cases of schizoaffective disorder, and these are quite difficult to treat. Then we have category of other category in which we include delusional disorder. Here the primary presentation is only of delusion, and this delusion could be of persecution, jealousy, of being referred or being followed. Erotomanic delusion, like a person with delusional disorder can develop a delusion that he is being admired or being loved by a very famous personality, a very high-fi VIP personality. So that is erotomanic delusion, which is also known as de Clermont syndrome. So if you come across a term like this, don't be just be able to connect with this. That is one of the delusional disorders with predominantly erotomanic delusions. So schizophrenia have got significant genetic loading. We have got the evidence from various family and twin genetic studies. Like if we have a case of schizophrenia, the risk of having schizophrenia is increased in the spouse to the tune of 1%, grandchildren 2.8%. And if you go by the twin data, among the dizygotic twins, the concordance rate is to the tune of 12%, while it becomes more than 3 times increase in monozygotic twins. So there is significant genetic factors do have a significant role to play in causation of schizophrenia. And this study was done in 2010, a family study. If there are presence of schizophrenia in both the parents, the risk of schizophrenia is 27.3. But if only one parent is affected, then the risk is 7%. And when there is no parent involved having schizophrenia, the risk is just 0.86%. So the risk reduces to below 1% if there is no presence of schizophrenic symptoms in any of the parents. And if we have one parent with schizophrenia and one with bipolar disorder, the risk is still quite high, 15.6%. The etiology of schizophrenia, like most psychiatric disorders, do not have a very clear-cut pathophysiology. We have putative theories, we have putative agents or explanations for the various symptoms, the presentation and clinical response in schizophrenia, but as of date, we do not have a clear-cut pathophysiology or etiology of schizophrenia. Genetically heterogeneous. It's not likely, it is quite likely that schizophrenia is not being caused by a single gene. It is a interplay among multiple putative genes which are being researched upon that produces symptoms of schizophrenia. Family studies have shown relatives at increased risk and negative symptoms tend to have a greater genetic component. As we have already discussed, among the twin studies, the concordance rate is almost more than 3 times higher in monozygotic twins in underlying the role of genetic factors in etiology of schizophrenia. Even adoption studies have shown increased likelihood of development of psychotic disorders. And genetic association studies have shown two genes which have been found to be associated with schizophrenia are DTNGP1 and NGR1. And two genes which have been found to be associated with cognitive deficits are COMT and BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor. Genome wide scans are being conducted and they have identified certain genetic mutations, but results are yet to be replicated. So it is inconclusive as of now. The second theory of schizophrenia is pertaining to the neurotransmitters. It's a dopamine theory of neurotransmitters. It is believed that it is the excess level of dopamine that produces schizophrenic symptoms, and drugs that alleviate the symptoms of schizophrenia, they reduce the dopaminergic activity. Drugs like amphetamine, which increases dopamine activity, produces psychotic symptoms. So these give emphasis or support to dopamine theory. Excess number of dopamine receptors or oversensitive dopamine receptors have been found in studies of schizophrenic patients, and primarily this excess is limited to the mesolimbic pathway. And in the mesocortical pathway, underactivity in dopamine functionality has been found, and this has been found to be correlated with the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. This is basically a diagrammatic representation of the various pathways, like the mesocortical pathway, mesolimbic pathway, and what all areas of brain are interrelated and connected and involved in schizophrenia. And dopamine theory of schizophrenia, this is a representation of that. It is believed that there happens an injury to the prefrontal cortex, and because of which dopamine neurons become underactive in the prefrontal cortex, and this leads to production of negative symptoms, while there is release of mesolimbic dopaminergic neurons from the inhibitory control of the prefrontal cortex, and because of which the positive symptoms appear. Dopamine theory doesn't completely explain schizophrenia. Antipsychotics block dopamine rapidly. They reduce the dopamine synaptic levels. They reduce the synaptic availability of dopamine, but symptom relief takes weeks and even in some cases few months for some improvement to come. So to be effective, antipsychotics must reduce dopamine activity to below normal levels. And there are also other neurotransmitters apart from dopamine which are involved in causing schizophrenia like serotonin, GABA, glutamate. The other etiology that has been proposed is pertaining to the alteration of brain structure and function in cases of schizophrenia. Some cases of schizophrenia tend to show enlargement of ventricle, which implies loss of brain cells, and this is correlated with poor performance on cognitive tests, poor pre-morbid adjustment, and poor response to treatment. Prefrontal cortex is one area of brain which has been maximally studied in most of the research on schizophrenia. Many behaviors disrupted by schizophrenia, like in speech, decision making, they are governed by the prefrontal cortex. And individuals with schizophrenia tend to show impairment on various neuropsychological tests of prefrontal cortex, like memory. Individuals with schizophrenia tend to show lower metabolic rates in prefrontal cortex, and disrupted communication among the neurons leads to loss of dendritic neurons. So this disconnect between the neurons is again in prefrontal cortex is again considered to be related to various negative symptoms of schizophrenia. Structural and functional abnormalities have also been found in temporal cortex. And temporal cortex, these are the various areas in which structural and functional abnormalities have been found. Temporal gyrus, hippocampus, amygdala, anterior cingulate. Reduced gray matter and volume has found is evident, and this environmental factors like damage during gestation or birth, obstetric complications have also been proposed to be causative of schizophrenia, while role of a viral infection during gestation has also been implicated, but again not many studies have supported it. Few studies have given evidence, have come to a conclusion that okay, history of viral infection in the mother during second trimester, like in a Finland study, schizophrenic rate was found to be higher when mother had a flu, a viral infection in second trimester of pregnancy. But what virus, which virus is responsible for producing schizophrenia? Again, it is not known. Developmental factors. Prefrontal cortex matures in adolescence or early adulthood, and dopamine activity also peaks in adolescence. So, stress activates HPA system, which triggers cortisol release, and cortisol is the one which increases dopamine activity. So, this leads to higher dopamine activity in the mesolimbic pathway, producing positive symptoms. Excessive pruning of synaptic connection is also being proposed as one of the causative agent. Use of cannabis during adolescence is associated with increased risk of schizophrenia. And this explains that why schizophrenia tends to have its onset usually in the second decade. Late adolescence or early adulthood is the age in which maximum chances of diagnosis of schizophrenia happens. Most cases of schizophrenia present in this second decade age group only. Psychological stress is also implicated as one of the causative agents. Individuals with schizophrenia and their first degree relatives are more reactive to stress, and this leads to greater decreases in positive mood and increases in negative mood. Socioeconomic status. Higher rate of schizophrenia have been found among poor people, like people having lower socioeconomic status. In them, the risk of schizophrenia is found to be higher. And this has been, people have proposed, the sociologists have given various theories to explain that why this thing could be possible. Stress of poverty causing this disorder or sociogenic hypothesis, and the other is the socio-selection theory. A person who is diagnosed with schizophrenia tend to slide down in the socio-economic scale of the society. He is, tends to drift down. He may lose his job, he may lose his resources, he may lose the support of his family members, and he will enter a spiral in which he will drift down and down and down, and finally he will reach a status of lower socioeconomic status, and that is, these are the two important theories which describe that why is low socioeconomic status people tend to have higher rates of schizophrenia. Family factors are also being proposed as etiological agents of schizophrenia. Schizoprenogenic mother, a mother who had been cold, dominating, conflict inducing. It has been proposed that the presence of a mother having these qualities, the risk of schizophrenia is higher in her children, but there is no support for this theory. The other theory is of communication deviance. Like in the family, if there is hostility, communication pattern is poor and distorted, then it can lead to production of some symptoms of schizophrenia. Again, it is quite inconclusive, so we cannot depend on this therapy. Family environment does affects relapse. By relapse, we mean reoccurrence of symptoms, reoccurrence of illness. And here the role of expressed emotion comes into being. Many theories, many research, many studies have been conducted which have shown that the presence of higher expressed emotion in an individual's family impacts his chances of relapse, impacts his recovery, impacts his functional recovery. So by expressed emotions, we mean presence of hostility in the family. There are certain members of family who will pass critical comments to the patient and his symptoms, or there could be possibility of some or the other family member getting emotionally over involved with the affected patient. So all these hostility, critical comments, emotional over involvement, these are parts of expressed emotion of the family. And families having higher expressed emotion in any or all of these domains tend to lead to higher chances of relapse in the affected individual. Developmental studies have also shown developmental histories of children who later developed schizophrenia. It has shown presence of lower IQ and more likely the individuals or the boys or girls who have been quite withdrawn or delinquent, substance abusers, having conduct problem, the risk of schizophrenia tends to increase as they grow old. These are the various studies which have been done, and they like presence of cognitive deficits evident at an early age is again a predictor of schizophrenia, while a study in Australia showed reduced gray matter volume, predicting later development of psychotic disorder. So these are various theories which have been there. And as far as treating schizophrenia is concerned, we have multiple options. We have options of psychopharmacological agents. We also have option of psychological therapies, family therapy, social therapy. But in most cases, a combination of these tend to produce the best results. Among the treatment medications which are available for treating schizophrenia, we have first generation antipsychotic drugs, which include phenothiazines, butyrophenones, thioxanthines, and these tend to reduce agitation, violent behavior. Primarily, they target positive symptoms, delusions, hallucinations, because they will block the blocker dopamine receptors in the mesolimbic pathway primarily, and tend to produce improvement in the positive symptoms. Their efficacy over negative symptoms is quite low, and their tendency to produce extrapyramidal side effects is quite high. By extrapyramidal side effects, we mean like patients can have tremors, they can have rigidity, tardive dyskinesia, neuroleptic malignant syndrome. These the risk of first generation antipsychotics producing EPS is quite high. Now we have second generation antipsychotics also. In that we have various agents like olanzapine, risperidone, aripiprazole. Clozapine is a typical second generation antipsychotic. They will tend to have effect not only on the dopamine receptors but also on serotonin receptors, and they tend to have greater efficacy over negative symptoms. They tend to produce lesser chances of EPS with these agents, and chances of non-compliance with second generation antipsychotic is therefore lower than first generation because they do not produce EPS. Among the side effects which can happen, like clozapine can reduce the leukocyte count and therefore can impair immune functioning. And the other side effects include seizures, dizziness, fatigue, drooling of saliva, weight gain, and this is the list of various first generation and second generation drugs which are available. Among the first generation, we have chlorpromazine, fluphenazine, decanoate, haloperidol, thioxanthine, trifluperazine. And among the second generation drugs, we have clozapine, aripiprazole, olanzapine, risperidone, ziprasidone, and quetiapine. CATI study, clinical antipsychotic trials of intervention effectiveness, it showed second generation drugs were not more effective than first generation drugs. Efficacy wise, there was no difference between the first and the second generation drugs. The second generation drugs did not produce fewer unpleasant side effects, and nearly 3/4 stopped taking the medication before the study ended. And the second generation antipsychotics are also producing serious side effects in the form of weight gain, diabetes, and pancreatitis. So we also have another option of therapy, which is psychological therapy. Patient Outcome Research Team, PORT, they gave a recommendation that in most cases of schizophrenia, it is always advisable to go for a combination of medications plus psychosocial intervention. Social skills training does produce very good effects if it is timely administered and given by competent individuals. Social skills training tend to produce very good effects in patients of schizophrenia. Here, the skills are taught to the affected individual for managing his interpersonal situation, like completing a job application, reading bus schedules, making appointment. Like small skills are being taught so that his interpersonal functioning improves, he learns some skills, and the decline which he is having in his social communication reduces. It includes role playing and other practice exercises both in group and in vivo. Family therapy is also very useful in cases of schizophrenia. The expressed emotion which is related to increasing the risk of relapse in most cases. Here the family is being educated about the causes, the symptoms and the signs of relapse. Importance of continuing medication is being stressed upon. Family is being helped to avoid blaming the patient for his symptoms and his illness. Emphasis is being laid on improving family communication and problem solving and increasing support and instilling hope. So these are the various components of family therapy. Again, we have other psychological treatments in the form of cognitive behavioral therapy, where we primarily target the delusional beliefs and other difficult thoughts or ideas which the patient with schizophrenia tends to have. The patient is made to recognize and challenge his delusional beliefs and recognize and challenge the expectation associated with negative symptoms like nothing will make me feel better, so why bother. This is one example of distorted cognition which a patient of schizophrenia is having, that whatever I will do, it will not make any difference, so why should I do. So this is producing that negative symptom, and this particular thought or cognition needs to be targeted on in the cognitive behavioral therapy. The other modality of treatment is cognitive remediation, cognitive enhancement therapy. Here, the stress is on improving his cognitive faculties of attention, memory, problem solving, and other cognitive based symptoms. Case management is to be done by a multidisciplinary team. Not a single psychiatrist can treat a patient of schizophrenia. He needs support of a psychologist, he needs support of a social worker, he needs support of the primary physician also to bring about the overall improvement in patient's functioning. And there are certain cases of schizophrenia in which nothing works and the patient requires custodial care. He needs to be kept in a long-term care in a residential facility. In such cases, vocational training is necessary. It is being given so that they can learn some skills and some vocation. So this is a brief description of the various symptoms of schizophrenia, the various proposed pathophysiological or etiological theories of schizophrenia, and the various treatment modalities which we are having as of now. Schizophrenia is not a simple disorder. It is not a single problem. It is not a single gene related problem. It is not a disorder which you can just give one paracetamol and treat it. It is having multiple symptoms in different domains of an individual's functioning. It is quite distressing for the patient as and for the family members, and it produces significant burden. In latest WHO studies, schizophrenia ranks among the top 10 causes of disability worldwide. The lifetime prevalence is 1%, but again, it is an understatement because it goes undiagnosed. Underdiagnosed. It is one of the most underdiagnosed disorders. So, schizophrenia, the idea of today's lecture was just to make you aware of this entity of schizophrenia, of being part of the entire gamut of various psychotic disorders, the various symptoms which a patient can have, and how we can diagnose the patient early and treat him so that he can be brought to the normal functioning status which he was enjoying earlier before the onset of illness. It is difficult, it is a challenge to treat and diagnose patients of schizophrenia, but still we can always make an effort and do our best. So with this, we come to the end of today's lecture. If any of you is having any questions, clarification, you are most welcome. Please type in your message. I'll be very happy to reply to you. If there are any questions, you can type in. How long after an acute episode does patient become lucid again, given any medication, sir? Okay. From an acute episode of psychotic symptoms, it takes a minimum of 3 weeks for the antipsychotic drugs, whatever, whether we start a first generation or a second generation, for its effects to start kicking in. It takes at least 2 to 3 weeks. Only after that, some symptom improvement happens. But to what extent the patient will improve, it depends. There are, like I've already told you, most cases tend to have a mix of positive and negative symptoms intermixed with it, some cognitive symptoms, some organized symptoms. So from that, the recovery happens. The positive symptoms tend to improve earlier. The negative symptoms take a lot of time. So it is very difficult to say for how long after an acute episode the patient will become normal again, but definitely some improvement will start kicking in right after 2 or 3 weeks. So we have to be patient when we are dealing with schizophrenic patients. It's a good question. At least you have all have started thinking on those lines at how we are going to manage. Any other question? Usual age of presentation, as I've already told you, it is the second decade. And the theory in support of that is the maturity of the neurons and the dopaminergic system towards the end of adolescence and beginning of the adulthood. So second decade is the usual age of presentation, but there are cases in which we do have atypical presentation. We have cases of childhood onset schizophrenia. We have presentation of schizophrenia even after 60 years of age. But in such cases, we have to be extra cautious because there could be a organic etiology or a medical problem which is being responsible, which is to be found out through proper investigation. The usual age is second decade. Okay. Any other question? If there are no further questions, I think it's time to close the session. Thank you very much.